It's so very nice to see you. You're perfect just the way you are. I've been reading some Civil War letters, and I've been thinking about how readers work on developing their skills over time. You see, every good thing takes time. So in this episode, you'll see successful readers talk about the strategies that they've used, and they think retrospectively about what worked for them. You might find that some of these skills work for you as well. So I hope you'll study on with me, my friends. So today we're talking about your reading life, and I want you to think retrospectively on what made you become a better reader when you were a child.
I think what made me become a better reader personally is my mom would always be reading with me over my shoulder, like helping me learn how to say new words and pronounce things correctly.
I grew up in a household where reading was always encouraged, and my parents, one thing they did that specifically when I was growing up was as we were driving down the highway or the road, they would always encourage me to sound out the words on every billboard we passed, which I guess if I were them, I would have gotten annoyed with hearing a toddler reading everything that he saw as it passed by. But I think that really encouraged me to engage with the world around me and apply my reading skills in a practical way.
When I was younger, I think I sort of learned to read in an interesting way, in that when I was really little, all of my favorite children's books and like the books that I read frequently at home, and what I would do is, I guess when my parents were reading to me, I would just kind of memorize what the words looked like. So I didn't really learn how to read. I just sort of, was familiar with a certain set of words, and I was able to then put, other sentences together with those few words when I was, reading new material. But then once I got to first, second grade and the levels got harder, I couldn't really keep up, and I had no skills to sound stuff out. So my teachers realized that and were like, oh gosh, she doesn't even know how to read. So I went to pull-out reading class, and I was tutored, and then I learned how to sound stuff out, and then I was a great reader, and I love to read.
Finding a subject material that captured my imagination. I think the first book that I really remember sitting down and reading from beginning to end and not even moving for dinner, which was a very important thing, was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. We had gone over to my grandmother's house. I got into the big easy chair. I could have turned on the TV set and watched cable, but instead I read for 4 hours straight. After that point, I continued and found many other books that I enjoyed.
I was not a reader as a child, and I did the work I was supposed to do, and I read because I had to read something, and that was it. As I got older, that's when it clicked that reading is taking me a place. I'm learning, and that's a whole different thing. When you don't have to, you do it. And right now in my life, a lot of stress, and when I leave the stress behind and I come home and I know my book is there and it takes me where I need to be. And that's it.
I heard that you also enjoy, reading your own choice books for fun. What guides your choices in your reading today as an adult?
I try to read a little bit of fiction and a little bit of nonfiction, a little bit of everything. Sometimes I look for books that I feel will help me to understand things that are going on in the world today a little bit better. And sometimes I think I gravitate towards fiction because it doesn't have an express purpose for me to use in work, but it's just a way for me to think about the world in a different way and get a bit more creative.
So I definitely love reading fiction more because I love getting enthralled with stories and learning about somebody else's life and living in their life. Say I'm reading a book, like a fantasy book, I love that because I feel like I can be in that world too, and it really plays on your imagination, and I love imagining stories and thinking about stories and writing stories myself. That's another thing that helped my reading, is writing stories, because I think that plays a lot on how your imagination works, which is why I really love fiction novels.
readers must look at technical reading with a unique strategic lens. Let's listen to some readers today who use technical reading in their everyday lives.
I'm an engineer. When I went to school, you had to read things over and over again in order to understand them. For difficult material, it went beyond reading a single book. It often went into reading multiple books on the same subject in order to get different perspectives. Yeah, sometimes on technical subjects, you have to go to multiple books in order to understand the subject matter. Sometimes a single book won't explain it clearly enough, or it won't explain it so that you can understand it. So if you pick up another text, they may explain things differently in a way that you can better understand it. And I found that very useful, especially in engineering courses where the material was technical and detailed.
So if I were to think about something that I were to read that's difficult, it would be an accounting pronouncement or something very technical. I read a lot of those documents in my job. And the skills I use are summarizing paragraphs as well as highlighting key points. I also write in the margin a key point so that I can go back to maybe that particular paragraph or that particular key point. These articles can be very large and very difficult to read. So if you want to go back, you need those key points. And I also put in Post-it notes so I know where the page is and I write the key point on the page.
Well, if I'm doing the technical reading, I'm really looking for keywords or subject materials that I'm looking for. But I like to read a little bit before and a little bit after, because when you're doing that, sometimes there's elements that help explain what you want to know or gave you a better depth of knowledge.
So in classes like history where we're annotating like scholarly like pieces of work that are a little denser and hard to like figure out, I think the best thing is always to annotate really heavy, like, you know, circle what they're talking about or like what's changing, or just write questions on the side. And the more you like really dive into it and like read it a few times, you can understand it. Especially like in higher level history classes, stuff we read is really hard. And I think the best thing to do is read it once and be like, okay, I know it's sort of about this thing, and then read it again, and then you sort of understand what's happening.
So when I'm taking notes on what I'm reading, usually I make notes that I would understand, and someone else might think, wow, you're crazy, what are you writing down? So for example, in France, they went through a really big revolution where they didn't have enough to eat. So I would say, no bread. Instead of, the government didn't want to give them any food because they thought they were higher up. I just say, no bread, government, done. Just something simple, easy, that I could remember what it means.
When I first meet readers, the vast majority of them are just reading too quickly. They skim material and they're not getting the full comprehensional value. There's no prize for fast reading, so slow is the way to go.
Even with my work, I work in the medical industry, and there's a lot of technical terms and there's a lot of material there that's hard to understand. So when you really break it down and not be so fast to get through the chapter, just taking it piece by piece and really just listening to myself read it, it makes for better comprehension.
There's research that supports peer-to-peer reading, and interestingly, both students grow well from this peer-to-peer partnership, learning from one another and developing and growing their skills as readers.
Gosh, I'm really bad at recalling different things from pieces that I read. So I'm still working on that, but it really helps me to have a conversation with someone about what I read, not only so I can get their input on whatever I was reading about, but so that I can think about the ideas that I just read, and it makes them more real when I'm talking about them with another person.
Talk about your reading, because I know that personally really helped me to comprehend when I was reading. And even helping other people, working with a partner, I think is so beneficial to reading because it lets you talk about what you're reading and discuss about it, because a lot of people, you can interpret text in a lot of different ways. So if you're able to discuss, maybe you'll hear something that you didn't think about while you were reading it. So I think it brings a lot of new ideas and new thoughts to the text, so you can comprehend it better. And like if somebody gets a meaning and you don't get that meaning and you get a different meaning, you can put what you've read together to kind of create a more solid view of the text and to comprehend it significantly better.
Now I have a tip specifically for you. When you carry around your independent reading book, I want you to also take along a notebook. And I want you to take notes about the things you're learning. I want you to take notes about the things you still have questions on. And I want you to take notes about the things that make you curious or that you're very excited about. And each time you open the book, look back on your notes and then move forward with your reading. A reading life lasts your whole life through. Let's set the stage today for a great reading life tomorrow. Study on, my friends.